Welcome to Unrestrained, the podcast series from CPI. Here you can enjoy conversations where professionals on all sides of crisis and behavior management relax and open up about themselves, their workplace, and their clients. You'll get the latest tips and trends from the best in the business, so tune in often to integrate their experiences with your own. Well, hello and welcome to Unrestrained, the podcast series from CPI. Today I'm joined by Susan Keith, CPI's Director of Curriculum Development. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Terry.
Let's begin with your background. What started it all for you, and how your formative years and how they came about bringing you to your role with CPI. And I should mention to the listeners that Susan is 18, going on 19-year veteran of CPI, and I think one of the longest employees of the company.
That's correct.
All
yeah.
right.
So when you ask me about my formative years, I won't necessarily go all the way back to my childhood.
Okay.
But
well, are you Wisconsin native?
No, I actually, my dad was in the Air Force, so I was actually born in South Dakota, and then we also lived in Central Illinois, and then moved to Chicago after he retired from the Air Force. So when I moved to Milwaukee was in 1988, and started at CPI in 1996. But my family was all still pretty much based in Chicago.
So you were just moving more around the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. Nothing exotic.
No, how'd you take to Milwaukee?
I loved Milwaukee.
Yeah. It's great. So you came to CPI in 96. 96, and what describe it when you got here?
So before CPI, because people ask me that sometimes, occasionally when I go out training, you talk about how you got there. So I worked as a sign language interpreter, actually, for Milwaukee Public Schools. And
how did you learn to sign?
How I learned to sign, I was exposed to sign language when I was in high school, probably. I went to summer camp a lot, and there were some campers who were hearing impaired. So I had to learn some signs. We all kind of learned some signs. And then my interest in it just kind of continued to grow, and I ended up getting a bachelor's degree, actually, in sign language studies and interpreting. So I took that on the road and actually joined the Peace Corps from there, and used my deaf education skills in that area for a while, in community outreach and that kind of thing.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school at a place called Madonna University, which is near Detroit, and has no relationship to the pop star. It's just...
Madonna
but
University
has a bachelor's degree in sign language studies.
And you took that to the Peace Corps. Where did the Peace Corps take you?
It took me to the Philippines first, and then to Ecuador.
Were you in Subic City?
No, I was in a small town in the middle of a province, about 4 hours from Manila, the capital.
Mm-hmm. And how did you? Was this working in the ESL as a thing in design, or?
It was. I worked for the Department of Social Welfare, kind of in the province, and they did a lot of outreach to the outlying communities, and they were trying to pull in families who had deaf or hearing impaired kids to have them meet, because they were very removed and very remote, right? And the perception was that it wasn't something to be looked at as just a difference. It was, culturally kind of looked at that time as, a punishment on the family. So a lot of times they kept those kids in, and they didn't let the kids, out into the community and socialize and that kind of thing. So we were trying to go out and bring them together and kind of change the perception a little bit, and help them create a sense of community, so they would have other people to talk to.
Sounds challenging.
Yeah.
Did you find that progressive kind of thinking started to the individuals must have been delighted to have some sort of an outlet finally.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of challenges just logistically for them to get to a central location to meet each other was a challenge too, just because transportation was an issue, and money to pay for transport was an issue, and so those were challenges. But then, so the question was, how that managed to get me here, right?
Yeah, well, after 2 years, first of all, it's fascinating to hear about someone who has a degree in sign. What is that degree called?
Sign language studies.
Sign language
interpreting.
Study. And you probably mentioned that just a few
that's okay.
moments earlier. And so you do your 2 years with the Peace Corps?
I did 1 year in the Philippines and 2 years in Ecuador.
Oh, 3 years.
Yeah.
And you come back, and
then I'm working at Milwaukee Public Schools. I was working in a middle school, interpreting for a couple of kids through their middle school career. And that was coming to a close for those kids. They were moving on to high school. And so different environment, they needed a different interpreter. And because we basically were together the whole time, they were, I was with them all the time.
All the time.
So you develop, a relationship that they needed to grow beyond me. So I was going to be reassigned to a different school. They were going to different schools, and I started thinking about different places I could be doing interpreting besides Milwaukee Public Schools. And while I was looking around for that, I actually learned about this job at CPI. As a full-time staff instructor. I learned about the position here. And so I thought it might be a good fit because also my love of travel and my, of teaching and, that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I got in 96 when that job as a staff instructor. So I spent from 96 till probably about 2008 as a full-time staff instructor.
Wow.
Traveling and training, 35, 34 weeks out of the year.
Wow. A lot of time on the road.
Yeah. But it was all really good time because it was, I've been to almost every state. I haven't been to Wyoming. I haven't been to Utah. But I think that's about it. In the U.S. states I haven't been to. Pretty much all the Canadian provinces. I've had the opportunity to travel overseas and teach classes.
So you've
internationally as well.
You've seen the program in action all over the world, literally.
Yes.
That's. Do you ever miss the days of so much intensive travel?
Yeah, and I actually get itchy here now when I don't get to get out once in a while, and I still do. Last month I was out a couple of weeks. I did teach a course last month, and I also went to a conference last month for professional development. So I do still get out occasionally.
All right. So now, how did you transition out of your role as a staff instructor to what you became after that?
I wanted to go back to school and get my master's, and I was looking at Nonviolent Crisis Intervention as a program, as a whole, wondering how it got put together so well, because it's really, really solid, and that content is solid, and it really hasn't changed significantly in the over 30 years that we've been in business.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, in your 18, you said in the 30 years we've been in business.
1980.
1980. That.
Yeah.
So when I was going to ask you about the evolution of the core curriculum and
so that's kind of ties in with my role change, because I wanted to know how that all got put together and who did that and who had the brilliance to know to put the crisis development model first and nonverbal behavior, and how did they know how to sequence everything, and where did all that information come from? So I looked there was a program here at a local school, Alverno College, that has a master's in instructional design and adult education. So that kind of seemed like a good fit. And I took a little entree class because the challenge with that was I was still traveling full-time. And being a full-time student, it was a weekend college program. Fortunately, every other weekend you go to school, but you still had all the assignments to do on the weekend. So they did some heavy recruiting and gave me a taster class, and I was hooked on it, and I thought, it was an intro to instructional design, and it gave me, I was like, okay, that's why the program's put that way. That's why this goes here, and that's why this goes here, and this is where the adult learning comes in, and, this is why we use the demonstrate, participate, explain teaching sequence in the program,
So this is theory of learning type
yeah,
thing?
so
Okay.
it made a whole lot more sense. This is, as far as adult education principles, why the program fits together the way it does.
Oh, so you saw the internal logistics from scholastic point of view. Right?
Yeah.
So you okay.
Yeah. And then where it wasn't just CPI that says you want to put things together. There's actually research that backs up the structure of the program.
I see.
Yeah.
And you completed that degree?
I think that was 2006. And then I always thought that it would be an ideal job to have, to be able to still travel and train occasionally, but then to be on the other side where you get to develop and enhance the learning resources that are available to certified instructors.
Right.
So as CPI continues to grow and expand, we have needs for new positions and new roles, and so there was one that opened up that allowed me to do that for a while.
And this is your role as director of curriculum?
At that time, I was still working. It was kind of a half and half, half-time staff instructor, and then half-time content expert, or really kind of, kind of content resource expert.
So you come off the road, basically. Yeah. You have now a master's in this discipline of understanding teaching. And so what's the first thing that you said, and you're partially teaching, now I'm just framing this so people can kind of see, and you look at the curriculum and you're given a mandate to expand it or develop it. And so what's the first thing that you sort of come up with? I mean, what do you step back and say, what curriculum do I want to...
Well, it's really a collaborative kind of process, and we come up with ideas for new training resources. So it doesn't necessarily sit with just one person.
Right.
So we do kind of do at least on a yearly basis and ongoing throughout the year, here's what we think we want to put out there. And we come up with ideas internally because we do know our certified instructors pretty well, but we also do a lot of polling the audience.
Oh.
And I still take calls from certified instructors when they call to ask about a training issue. I will still take those calls, as well, and through the course of those conversations, I'll ask questions too about if we had X resource available, would you use it, or what would you want to see? So we do informal questions of our instructors when they call like that, but we also on occasion will do more formal kinds of surveys, and we'll send out, we'll get ideas, we'll kind of gather the top 5 ideas that we hear a lot over the phone, maybe, and put them together in a poll or a survey and send that out to people. We'll get ideas from the global professional instructors when they're out teaching. They'll hear things. So we ask a lot of people about, a lot of different areas before we kind of decide on developing different learning resources for people.
So it's a lot of driven by grassroots, hands-on type of experience, and people saying, hey, I need this, or something better.
Yeah, and we also look at what's happening in the field of best practice. So when we developed the Autism Spectrum Disorders program, the Advanced Renewal course, we did a lot of research out there about what best practice was for supporting kids and adults on the autism spectrum, and we pulled that into the program as well. And we talked a lot to certified instructors that work specifically in the field of autism to make sure that the content was going to be relevant to the audience that came to it.
And when was that introduced?
2006 at our International Instructors Conference in St. Louis.
What are the greatest challenges that you've had here over the years you've trained? Anything organizationally that you still think that is a work in progress, and other things that have been home runs?
So from a training, development, and learning resource standpoint, I suppose that some of our home run programs have been the autism program, the trauma-informed care program. And I'm coming at this, historically at CPI from Nonviolent Crisis Intervention perspective, but we also have had a lot of successes in the last few years with our Prepare training program becoming, much more widespread. We've grown quite a lot in the UK. We've incorporated some other training options there. We've collaborated on other things with our office in the UK. Dementia care services has been a huge addition and a really, really, really valuable addition. And when we developed our dementia and related cognitive challenges advanced program, we were already working with DCS Dementia Care a little bit, and we got, as some content experts. So I'd have to say that all of those things have been really big successes in the most recent past. Especially when I look at the dementia care stuff, just on a personal level, if I knew then what I know now about supporting people with dementia and cognitive challenges, it would have helped a lot when my mother was going through a lot of illness at the end of her life and that kind of thing.
Well, I think that the Warchill Best Abilities model has stands up there with Claudia Allen's work. Almost seems to be, from at least from an outside perspective, as groundbreaking and as important in the way that we view the capabilities of people with dementia.
Yeah.
How about, you talked about subject matter experts, as you once referred to them earlier when we were speaking, SMEs, right? So those subject matter experts, we work with them to develop curriculum. Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we have obviously internal and external SMEs. It's a fun nickname, right? Subject matter expert.
So they're even roaming around here.
Yeah, so we certainly want to look outwards, and we ask our certified instructors. We ask our meritorious instructors, because we have a pool of folks who are called meritorious instructors who have achieved a level of status within the larger instructor community, based on several different measurements. And so we definitely poll that audience because they volunteer. Part of being a meritorious instructor is being willing to interact with us more to give us information on what they're doing.
Quick thumbnail of how someone gets to a meritorious?
It's number of training hours, number of hours, or number of years you've been an instructor, how many programs you've been to, those kinds of different things are, and I don't know the exact rubric measurements, but those kind of things. We have, I think, over 100 meritorious instructors worldwide at the moment. So they're a very valuable resource as external experts, but it's not only them either. I consider every certified instructor a subject matter expert. because they are in the field every day, hands-on. They live the training. They live and breathe the program. So I think every certified instructor is a subject matter expert in their particular field.
Great focus group to be able to go out to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do have some ongoing relationships with, a pool of certified instructors, so they tend to be my go-to folks, but I definitely reach out to others as well. And internally, anybody that teaches nonviolent crisis intervention or PREPARE training or the DCS program or any of our, programs are going to be subject matter experts as well, because they teach it all the time. So if the nonviolent crisis intervention training program, that's our standard, that's our standard bearer in that program. I think earlier we talked about, the evolution of that a little bit, and that content really has been very standard and very consistent over all the years that I've been here, and as far as I know, the years before I was here. We update our workbooks, we update the look and the graphics of things. We've updated, certified instructors who are listening will recognize that we've updated our illustrations over the years.
Right.
They used to be like line drawing, almost stick figure-like.
When did hybrid come in?
Hybrid training was, I want to say around 2008, 2009. And that was our first official online kind of offering. So it's a blended option, really, is what we call it, because you take part of your course online, and then certified instructors bring their staff in and apply what was learned online in the classroom session. So you get a little bit of both, which makes the options a little bit more flexible for people, if they especially have staff who are spread out or a really huge number of staff that they need to kind of reach out to.
Right. How about, can you talk about TIC a little bit, trauma-informed care, and what's happening in the market with that? I know that's been kind of a hot button recently. It's getting a lot of press and seems to be effective for a lot of schools. Trauma-informed
care is one of our advanced renewal programs, and all of our advanced renewal programs are going to be based in nonviolent crisis intervention. So even when we go out into the field and we research best practice and talk to subject matter experts, we are going to take that and map it onto the foundation of the crisis development model. So trauma-informed care is really an operating procedure. It's something that is practiced on a daily basis, like care, welfare, safety, and security. So it's your standard operating procedure. It's a way that your organization changes its culture. I guess one of the big ways to describe it.
Transmitting fundamental policy perspectives like that to an organization as big as a school,
which is because it is changing an organization is very hard sometimes from the top down. So when you think about trauma-informed care, it's about the philosophy or the approach here is asking people what happened to you versus what's wrong with you, and to look at the world through the lens or the perspective of the trauma that person might have encountered or that they are still living with. And so when we talk about this in the trauma-informed care program...
in the scope of your career, where would this definition have arrived?
There's a lot of organizations that already do a lot of work in the area of trauma-informed care, like the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, for example, or SAMHSA. They have a lot of already work done on trauma-informed care. So definitions are coined there. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual actually defines PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is kind of under the umbrella. But trauma-informed care is more of an operating procedure in how we interact with each other. And the way we set up our environment to be more open and welcoming, from a visual standpoint, from just how staff treat each other is trauma-informed. So there's several different elements to creating that culture of care. But because it can be challenging sometimes to start on the big macro level with organizations and administrations and people at the very top, we tend to look also in the program at what can you do on an individual level. So knowing what you now know coming out of this program, what can you do when you go back to work tomorrow to start changing the culture of care in whatever you can influence, and to not try to go in and boil the ocean all at once, but on an individual level, because we talk about integrated experience, and so what I do is going to have an impact on what you do, and people are going to see that what I do has a different impact on this individual who might be dealing with trauma than somebody coming in and saying, just get over it. You know, you have to look at where that person is coming from and trying to meet them where they're at. And that primarily, you know, we talk a lot about safety and emotional security, and that those things have to be in place before we can ask people to achieve anything more.
Yes, but has the identification of trauma-informed care, or the acronym, I mean, when in your career did they start speaking about that? I'm wondering, like, as a thing. In 2000, would you have understood what trauma-informed?
No,
okay.
Personally not so much.
Okay.
But this is, again, something that came out of the requests of a lot of certified instructors, like our autism program did. And through the research, because my department is research and development. So the research side of it also goes out and looks into publications, and we do did a lot of research for that trauma-informed care program, and before we ever started looking at how to put the curriculum together.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And so we do have, you know, the research side of things in the department as well, and they're very instrumental to making sure that content that does get put together has a basis out there.
So you worked with sort of a team approach to this, and
Yes.
then put together before it was introduced as curriculum finally.
Yeah, and then also, you know, people might be interested in that once we get drafts and prototypes put together, we do a lot of internal pilots. We do a lot of run-throughs here just amongst ourselves as staff, and then we start to invite certified instructors in as test audiences as well. So we do a lot of piloting before we let things out the door on an official basis.
What did we do recently for a product with that?
We've done that also, not with such large programs, but we also do that with smaller things. Like we put together a refresher a few years ago on bullying behaviors that focuses on educators and schools. And we brought in some educators that are certified instructors to participate in that program.
How does a refresher get developed?
Again, a lot of times it's based on requests from instructors. So we knew without really, I mean, we did ask certified instructors their opinion on this, but we also knew almost without asking certified instructors that bullying was a huge issue, because we obviously see a lot about it in the press and all those stories that come out in the news. So the bullying behaviors refresher was a pretty easy one to vet. There's so much out there in the world of what to do about bullying behaviors that it was a challenge to narrow it down and figure out how it all fits within the context of nonviolent crisis intervention. That was the biggest challenge in developing that one, not finding the information, but whittling the information down into, you know, your minimum 3-hour refresher, if possible.
Well, that's such a topic these days that's in, I mean, with cyberbullying and with the almost unlimited access people now have to each other, more timely than ever to sort of prevent that.
We did do, a coworker who is no longer here, she and I also did an article a number of years ago on cyberbullying, which kind of is something that we referenced too. You know, there's a bit of a section in the bullying behaviors workbook about cyberbullying. There's some examples in there as well, kind of based on what we wrote years before that. We're currently working on some professional development series modules for educators that are designed to be a bit more of a professional development. Is really very descriptive, because a lot of times educators will call us as certified instructors and ask, what can I do? My principal is asking me to do something at a staff day, and I get 60 minutes. I can't train people in 60 minutes. What can I do? They're asking me to present something.
Right.
And so the professional development modules are designed to help people have a little bit more structured way to present information on
that's
diffusing difficult conversations, for example.
Okay, well, and some other examples. I mean, it sounds like a great flexibility and kind of a lifesaver for people who have this time, well, not just time to fill, but who wish to impart a meaningful message to the people that they're going to speak to. And so what are some of the other ones that they would be able to choose from?
Currently available is one called Diffusing Difficult Conversations. We've got one on intervening alone. You know, if you find yourself in a school building with a parent or a student, and we're working also on a module for promoting positive behavior. Why, you know, defining what challenging behavior is, why does it happen, what are some strategies for minimizing challenging and maximizing positive supportive behaviors.
In development right now.
That's going to be a 2-part series. Module 1 is available. Module 2 will be shortly.
All right. And how do you go about, again, you put a team together to develop content, you canvass your global, your communities out there, and then start to put it together? And
some of our existing content we know is very popular with certified instructors based on workbook sales, for example. So sometimes we'll look at that as well, and so we take some of that information or some of that content and adapt it to a different format. That happens also. the promoting positive behavior modules, some of this information is actually coming from some of our colleagues at Positive Options in the UK. So some of the curriculum that they developed as an organization before they became a part of CPI is being distilled into these professional development modules as well.
I see MAPA being offered here in the States now as well.
It's Nonviolent Crisis Intervention,
Right,
the MAPA edition. And MAPA stands for the Management of Actual and Potential Aggression. So it's a renewal program that just started being offered this year. It is nonviolent crisis intervention with some additional decision-making tools incorporated into it, some different ways of supporting people through the physical aggression part of a crisis that can happen, and really kind of an advanced level of looking at how to decide if it's time to use a physical intervention or not, or is there something else, high risk, low risk behaviors, and much more focus on those kinds of things within the content of nonviolent crisis intervention.
So, yeah. I see. So it trains you to look for a few things outside of the escalation continuum that we use in the model now, or just kind of amplifies some of those?
It kind of amplifies what's in there already, and it also gives certified instructors a much more expanded view of how to facilitate, and enhances your abilities and your skills at facilitation. So because it's a renewal program, you are getting many more facilitation skills, advanced training, adult education theory, and learning principles. So adult learning theory and that kind of thing is incorporated into that renewal program as well.
So for people who may have sort of internalized the basics of the core curriculum to come in with some more advanced techniques to just better manage. That sounds exciting.
Yeah. It's been very well received. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And any other new curriculum developments that you're especially excited about that you'd want to talk about today?
We've been doing a lot more online things. We've been doing, we have some videos on demand that are available to certified instructors to use with their staff, or anyone, whether they're a certified instructor or not. Actually, if I'm just a person who does a web search on crisis intervention, and I find the Crisis Prevention Institute's website and I want to learn something about setting limits, I can purchase a video on demand and watch it. So we have options for the public as well to watch and take a look at and learn some things, which is a kind of a new direction that has come up in the last year or two as well.
I've noticed that all the webinars on the CPI site are now for the asking, pretty much.
Well, we have a couple of pools of webinars. So we have a whole several years worth of e-refresher webinars that are devoted to certified instructors and helping them be better at teaching the program. And this year we're talking about, promoting staff engagement. And so we've actually incorporated interviews and the expertise of certified instructors. And over the course of the webinars this year, we'll have used the expertise of 3 specific certified instructors. They actually are developing most of the webinar themselves, and I just kind of come in to help knit it all together with nonviolent crisis intervention. So we're looking at things from trauma-informed care, as we already talked about, to fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and some other things that'll come up throughout the course of the year. We also, though, have webinars that are more, I guess, public-facing that anyone could access if they choose to do so. So we did do one this year on mental health issues in the workplace that anyone could access if they chose to. Yeah.
How's the traffic on those?
Really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
People are availing themselves of the information. That's great.
The June webinar on fetal alcohol spectrum, we've had out now for maybe 2 weeks, and I didn't look at the numbers yesterday, but I would guess it's over 100 views already.
Great.
So very popular one, really well done. I think of my job primarily really as creating as many resources as possible to help certified instructors be the best instructors they can be. So my job is to support the learning of the people that are out there teaching the program in whatever way I possibly can do. And if that means revising something that exists and updating it, then that's what we'll do. If it means coming up with something brand new, then we'll look at how to make that happen as well. And that's what our whole department, and obviously what CPI is devoted to as well. We work a lot with the workplace learning department because they're devoted to supporting certified instructors after they get their training. Once they become certified, Workplace Learning is out there to support you guys. And when you call into the Workplace Learning Department. And then we collaborate on projects that we hear from you cross-departmentally as well.
So real hands-on, real-world examples that drive both how we develop what we teach and then how we support people when they're actually trying to deliver that message in the marketplace.
Yeah. It's because we're called the Crisis Prevention Institute, which sometimes, I laugh at a little bit because an institute sounds very grand, and it sounds like we used to joke about being a big campus on rolling grass hills and everything, and actually we kind of are now because we moved offices a few years ago, and now we actually do have a pond on the side that we have, and we do have a nice place to be now. But
Institute does sound.
We are a learning organization.
Right.
We support learning, we support teaching, and we want to make sure that everything we put out there is in the best interest of the certified instructor and ultimately the people they're going to present that information to. So however we can make that happen effectively is what we want to do.
It goes back in a conceptual way to you signing in the Philippines. I mean, those same sort of values about people being more capable and support all across this process, of communication process in this case as it may be. So that's interesting how it comes together. Do you find a way to use signing anymore in your life?
I used to think that when I took my job as a certified instructor or a staff instructor, because I traveled 3 weeks and I was off a week, that I would still have plenty of time to freelance. But it was such a learning curve when I took this job that I was so devoted to learning the job that unfortunately I didn't do as much of that. But I would occasionally have deaf participants in the program, which was awesome, and we still do. And so we hire interpreters to help them out. We hire interpreters, and people still here at CPI will come and ask me if there's a deaf participant or they get a question about how to adapt or tailor course concepts for a hearing impaired population. How do I do that? People still come and seek some information from me, and I will still try to answer. But I'm not as actively involved as I used to be.
If you could have a committee of 3 people, living or dead, to help you make decisions, who would they be and why? And it's funny, I'll say this, I just talked about this to somebody just a little bit earlier, and they said, famous people, and I thought, no, they don't have to be, it could be, maybe your grandfather, maybe somebody.
Well, because there are different levels of resource, and who I would go to for what, So I actually will go, there are people that I'll go to read things about, because there's so much information online now. I mean, I get I am, subscribe to a lot of newsletters that you get electronically, in your inbox every day or every week, by people who are well known in the field of autism. I get that. I'll get weekly updates on things that are going on in the world of bullying behavior, and that kind of thing. So I know that those are coming from expert resources. I keep tabs on different websites that are positive behavior intervention supports. I keep tabs on that through best practice and different valid, researchers in the field. So
what
even people
what newsletter do you read first? That'd be interesting to know. Like behavioral health comes in, and I got to check it out.
The National Child Traumatic Stress Network is a fantastically thorough and really good website.
Excellent.
To get information that's related specifically to kids, obviously. And SAMHSA is one that obviously will deal with kids, but also has a lot of information for adults. National Child Traumatic Stress Network actually is a good one too, because you can actually take online courses through that website for nothing.
Excellent.
But I also will look at, there are colleagues here that I will go to when there are ideas bouncing around in my own head, and if I'm developing, because right now I'm in the midst of developing the Promoting Positive Behavior professional development series that I mentioned earlier. So when I have ideas rattling around in my head about, should I put this activity in here? Is this the format it should take? After a while, you got to get it out of your own head. And you have to go and talk to other people, and so I typically will go to colleagues that have been here, for quite a while.
I think it's all right if you name names.
Oh, Well, right now I'm chatting with Jeff Schill about the NCI MAPA program and some of the developments that are coming up in there. I'm working with Pam Sikorsky and Mary Secor and Julie Porter in Workplace Learning about advanced program updates and developments and about internal training resources as well. So we do tend to collaborate that way. I work a lot with Bob Retman, who's our research side of research and development on, what do you think about this idea? And our, so there's three of us kind of sitting in a row in research and development, and so Matt and Bob and I all work together on bouncing ideas around with my office mate, Carrie Ann, who also does a lot of our online stuff. So if I have this brilliant idea that, hey, we should put X online, how do you think this is going to look? She's the person I'd go to find out how that would look and how we would make that usable and user-friendly.
Okay.
She's brings a lot of that experience in.
No, this is a great answer.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I have several friends who are teachers in different school districts who are not necessarily certified instructors but are somewhat familiar with our curriculum, having been participants in the program. So I'll bounce ideas off of them as well.
Great.
Yeah, so I've got, kind of, I guess, a pool of internal and external places that I'll go.
That's okay. And I hope maybe that if somebody out there is hearing this and has a really hot idea for curriculum development, that they could
Yes, we will
drop you a
take
line.
all ideas, and there is no idea that's too far out there to pose. A lot of the ideas that certified instructors see come up through the years, some of them have come out of the proceedings of our our international instructor conferences. So you are all going to start hearing and seeing more about the next International Instructor Conference, which is in 2015. It's in New Orleans. It's in July next year. And so that's something to be considering, not only getting yourself to if you can. Some of the things actually that you're hearing about in the e-learning refresher series this year came out of what happened at the conference in Orlando a couple of years ago. And the most direct example I can give you is the one on fetal alcohol spectrum that we recorded last year, because the certified instructor is Chris Arnold that I worked with on that webinar last month, and I met him in Orlando that year. And we've been talking ever since about how we can use his expertise and get that out to everybody else.
It's a terrific example.
Yeah, so that's a real direct result.
So that's New Orleans 2015 in the month of
in July.
July.
Yes.
So a chance to really make your voice heard and to drive some of the decisions around curriculum here.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Susan, is there anything you'd like to say to the people that are listening before you go? Just, well, we'd like to say thank you very much for joining us on Unrestrained, where our guest has been Susan Keith.
And I would encourage you to, if this is the first podcast that you're tapping into, I want to encourage you to think about the fact that this is going to be a series. That Kendra Stia recorded the first one that I believe Terry introduced at the start.
That's correct.
And that we are all connected, so we're trying to tie threads between each of the podcasts as well. So I would encourage everybody to listen to as many as possible. And I would also encourage everyone listening to take advantage of the resources that you have available as a certified instructor. Because one of the things that we all talk about here is how can we get certified instructors to be more aware of the resources that are available, to take advantage of them, and to use them to improve your practice as an instructor. Because there's so much available through articles on the website. There are different newsletters on the website. We just can't possibly, in your initial training programs, we can't tell you everything that's there. It would take another 3 days. Maybe not that long, but another 3 hours, right? So I really want to encourage you, if you haven't visited the CPI website lately, get on there and tour around in your free time if you have some, and check out some of those resources that are available, because they really are there devoted to helping you be the best instructor you can be and get some of that stuff out to your staff when you're training them as well.
Excellent advice.
That's from my angle in the Learning Corner, to really encourage people to use the resources that we put out there for you, because you are asking for them, so take advantage of what's there.
Well, that's a great directive. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening today on Unrestrained, the CPI podcast series. Take care. Thank you for listening to Unrestrained. Tune in again on August 13th when our guest will be Global Professional Instructor and Certified Road Warrior Dan Lonegro. Until then, this is your host, Terry Vitone, hoping your intention is prevention.